What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Welcome into today's video where we're going to talk a little bit about the trading system within MLB The Show and some experience that I've now had with the trading system over a few seasons and franchises, and some information that may be helpful for you guys to know. So we talked in earlier videos this year about how they modified the trading standards within the game and what it would be required to give up in order to acquire a big name player. And specifically, I wanted to use Juan Soto as an example because he is now potentially going to be traded away from the Washington Nationals. And it's a situation where there could be multiple teams interested in him. He could be interested in going to multiple different places. And he's one of those generational talents that's going to require a lot in return. And I wanted to see if I could maybe bring him onto the team in my Pirates franchise. And we'll have to wait and see if I can pull something off, and I know that it's not realistic that he would ever go to the Pirates, but I still wanted to try nonetheless to see what it would take, and I found it extremely interesting the price that it takes in order to get him onto the team. So I decided that I would give them first and foremost an immediate replacement in their outfield in Travis Swaggerty, who is a very, very solid prospect right now. He's a 79 with B potential, only 25 years old. He's doing fantastic for me and has done fantastic since he came up last year, batting over 300 the entire time. So his value is up right now as a player. Likewise, I decided since they needed a couple of different positions on their seeking list down there, I would go and throw in a top prospect in my system, like a Nick Gonzalez, who is a second baseman, who is an 80 overall, B potential, 23 years old. So they're getting two immediate starters, especially whenever you take a look at their roster and what they have. This person would start at second base, but they also are lacking at other positions in the infield, like first base, where Nick Gonzalez could play, or other infield positions, and therefore they're getting an immediate starter there, and they're getting an immediate replacement, like I said, for Juan Soto, and they don't really have anything behind him in order to replace him if he's traded away. And then the other major factor that is included in this trade is that the Nationals need starting pitching. They're pretty weak on the starting pitching end of things, and so I figured, okay, well, naturally in a trade like this, you're probably going to have to give up one of your best prospects. And so I threw in Quinn Priester, 75 overall, A potential, 22 years old. And it's interesting, throwing in three top prospects within the system, two of them position players that are at or near an 80 overall and very young, as well as an A potential, future ace pitcher, a player that would be their number 2 pitcher right now on the roster and very shortly the number 1 pitcher on their roster, is still not enough to acquire a generational player like Juan Soto. And that's going to have to do with multiple factors. He is hot right now. He's playing well. He's played well over his multiple years that they now factor into the trading system. So over the past 3 or 4 years, I can't remember what the number is exactly, he's played really well. So it makes sense, especially with all the home runs that he hits, the power that he has, the contact that he has, his fielding ability, that he's going to fetch a massive price. But essentially what this is saying is you need to include basically 2 A potential players within a trade like this, and it's going to be very difficult for anybody to acquire a guy like this unless you're sending 3 top prospects that are 3 major league top prospects, not just even 3 top prospects within your system. This trade system is not perfect, however, so you would think Quinn Priester would be maybe the most important piece in this trade for them, considering what they have, or rather what they don't have on their pitching staff. But that's not really the case. If I actually scroll up and start trying to plug in other players that are on my team that are of, I would say, less value than Quinn Priester, they're potentially getting me to the same point with the trade, and it's not taking it past it because they simply won't accept the trade. So what's happening here, in order to break this down a little bit, is unless you meet certain requirements, which is basically essentially 2A potential players that are in the mid to high 70s for a guy like this that are young players. Unless you're meeting certain basic requirements, it doesn't matter what you throw in as the 3 players, you're not going to get the bar to move to the opposite side. You're not going to be able to acquire this player. And we've talked about that. You're going to have to give up significantly more to get top-end players like this than you have had in the past. So this is an incredibly important and incredibly beneficial improvement to the game, because a team like the Pirates, for example, shouldn't be able to just go out and easily acquire every top player that they possibly want off of another team. I mean, you can get into unrealistic rebuilds like that where you're just having fun. You're trying to go out and acquire every player, but you just simply don't have the assets to be able to do that on the Pirates, and we're now seeing a little bit more realistic of an approach to it. What I will say, however, is that we can include some players that will get us to that point. So if we give up 3 players that are at that 80 mark, then it's going to say that they're interested in it. So the difference here is basically between Quinn Priester and Mason Martin, which is a 5 or so overall difference. And I was able to then utilize these combination of players to get him on the team. The other thing that we can do is we can switch this out. We can include Quinn Priester, for example, and we could switch out who is probably the least valuable player here in Travis Swaggerty and try to find somebody else that might get the trade to go through. But as you see, I can scroll down through every player, and I can even get through to some of my other A potential guys, and it's not going to take it. They do want Bubba Chandler. He's one of the most valuable players in my entire system, but if I go down to Ji-Hwan Bae, he's not going to take that. That's a young A potential player. We can take a look at Lonnie White Jr., who is my top outfield prospect right now, or one of them, I should say, 20 years old, A potential, and that's not going to move the needle enough in order to make it happen. So you can really get a good idea just by looking at this, what it's going to take in order to acquire major generational talents like a Juan Soto, for example. And that's good for the health of franchise mode within MLB The Show, and that's a good improvement. But what I will say is that there are still workarounds for it, and I want to show you guys a workaround that I was able to get done. And essentially what it is it's packaging your lower tier prospects for another player off of another team that has more value, and then packaging those players together in order to acquire a player like Juan Soto without having to necessarily give up your top prospects. So jumping over to this franchise, you guys can see that I do have Juan Soto on the team. The other thing that you'll see is I still have Quinn Priester hanging around here. You'll also see I still have Nick Gonzalez. I still have the other players that I was talking about in Travis Swaggerty and Lonnie White Jr. and various other players on the team. So I didn't have to give up any of my top prospects in order to get him onto the team. And if we go to the transactions list, it'll show you guys exactly what I actually had to do in order to acquire him. And essentially, all that is like I said earlier, packaging players in order to move up. So we sent over Cole Tucker, a relief pitching prospect, for starting pitcher Casey Mize, which is a more important trade piece in this entire situation. And then we were able to send over Casey Mize, Matt Frazier, who is a top outfield prospect for me, 75 with B potential, and a current starter in Anthony Alford for starting pitcher Ian Anderson, who was the major trade piece in order to acquire Juan Soto. So we sent Ian Anderson over to their team, Diego Castillo, the prospect, and Johan Mieses, the prospect, in order to get it done. So we did have to part ways with a lot of prospects from our system, but we were able to get away with it without having to trade our top prospects from the system, because you can always package together to move up. And essentially what we did was we packaged a bunch of prospects together to get Ian Anderson, and then send Ian Anderson over to the Nationals so that he could be the main piece in that trade. And ultimately what they ended up getting out of this trade was beneficial to them, but this is a very lengthy and somewhat unrealistic, probably mainly unrealistic way to go about making a trade. And I want to put that little asterisk in there that if you're doing this, you're trying to work around the system. system. There's not really any ifs, ands, or buts about it, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, that's not to say that the Pirates couldn't get Juan Soto. If they gave up 3 or 4 of their top prospects or some massive trade package, they might be able to get him onto the team, especially if they gave positions of need. One of the things that I like to think about is, well, maybe the Pirates do decide at one point to spend some money, and they do decide to go after, like, they know Juan Soto, 24 years old, is out there and available, and they could pay him a ton of money. They're not paying anybody else a bunch of money. They might be able to be one of the teams that could actually get them because their farm system is so strong. So you go out, you send a bunch of top prospects, you get this generational cornerstone player for your team, and you're still probably with a low payroll. I mean, all things considered, the Pirates are so low on the payroll that adding a guy like Juan Soto and paying him the most money out of any player in the league, they would still probably be at least bottom half in the league in terms of their payroll. So it is, in my opinion, a potential that they could do it, and therefore that's why I wanted to explore the possibility and why I wanted to make this video, because it's a culmination of my experiences so far on the game, and it's, you know, pretty positive, all things considered. You have to do a lot in order to acquire a player like that. Even if you're trying to work around the system, like I'm showing you guys here, that you're capable of doing, you're going to have to put in a lot of effort in order to make it happen and in order to get those players. Now, like I said, the system's not perfect. The system sometimes overvalues certain players and undervalues other players. It was weird. For example, whenever I was going through my starting pitcher prospects, Ian Anderson was very close in value to like a 77 overall A potential pitcher on another team. So it's very performance based now, and we've talked about that in previous videos. So it is a little bit odd, but I did think that this information could be useful to you guys in some way, knowing that you can work around the system, that you can do a couple of different things in order to package players to then make a trade, and like I said, work around it. So, you know, hopefully this information was helpful to you guys in some way, and at the very least, it's a discussion topic to see what you guys think of the current state of the trade system within the game. Like I said over and over, it's not perfect, but it seems to be a step in the right direction. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. As always, leave a like on the video, comment, and subscribe, especially if you're new around here for more content. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you guys have a good one.